Lizabeth Scott was a mysterious wonder in the Hollywood world. She was actually an it girl who was very popular and known for her femme fatale characters in film noirs. But for some odd reason, none of her castmates liked her. In fact, they were terrified of her. Some castmates would walk out of million-dollar movie deals just to avoid working with her. And I'm talking about where the castmates would have been the lead in the movie. They didn't even care about the perks. They just didn't want to work with her. People always seemed to come up either very sick or ill or dead that were around her, and she was known to proudly sleep her way to the top. The movie All About Eve was probably based on her life, now that I think about it, because she did work her way up to the top with the same tactics. She was a gorgeous star who was well-spoken and had a beautiful singing voice, yet the tabloids didn't even care to shed her in a positive light. Rumors abound that she was in fact a lesbian, and that's why she never made it to the altar or have any kids. She was living a double life in an era where that was very taboo. In today's video, we will get to the nitty-gritty. Why didn't anyone like her? What was she doing behind the scenes? Is this all true? All the rumors true? Was she actually a really nice person behind the scenes and everybody else was the weirdo? Let's get into it. But first, hey friend, welcome to my channel, Korean Allude, where we deep dive and break down the most iconic stars through history. If you're not yet subscribed, please be sure to do so. And if you're already subscribed, please turn on your notification bell so you never miss an upload. Now, without further ado, let's get into this video. So Lizabeth Scott was born Emma Matzo on September 29, 1922 in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and she emerged from humble beginnings to become a Hollywood legend. Her father ran the family grocery store, Matzo Market, and young Emma attended Marywood Seminary for Catholic girls as the eldest of 6 children. While the details of her parents' ethnic origins remain murky, most accounts mention English, Russian, and Ukrainian heritage. Scott's passion for acting ignited during her time at Scranton's Central High School, where she shone in several plays. After dabbling in local theater productions, she became fiercely determined to conquer Broadway. Her supportive father facilitated her move to New York City, securing her a place at the reputable Ferguson Residence for Women. It was there that Emma Matzo reinvented herself, inspired by reading about Mary, Queen of Scots, and Elizabeth I, adopting Elizabeth and Scott as her stage name, and later dropping the E for a unique twist. Her first significant break came in 1942 with an off-Broadway show called Rain, eagerly anticipating critical acclaim. Scott was crushed when not a single critic attended or reviewed her performance. However, fate intervened when Broadway producer Michael Meyerberg noticed her talent and offered her the role of understudy to the formidable Tallulah Bankhead in the play The Skin of Our Teeth. This golden opportunity quickly turned sour, Meyerberg struggling with Bankhead's notorious temper and refusal to attend rehearsals, intended to use Scott as leverage against the star. Unbeknownst to Scott, this maneuver violated Bankhead's contract, which explicitly barred hiring an understudy for her role. When Bankhead discovered the breach, her wrath extended not only to Meyerberg, but also to Scott. The theater was soon electrified by tension. Bankhead treated Scott with disdain. Wouldn't you? I mean, if somebody just brought someone on to replace you, would you be happy about it? So I understand Tallulah Bankhead's point there, and I did do a video for her also. Bankhead treated Scott with a lot of anger, barking orders without a hint of civility. New to Broadway, Scott found herself bullied by the domineering diva. But rather than cower, Scott summoned her courage and confronted Bankhead, requesting one simple thing, the use of the word please. To everyone's shock, Bankhead complied, adding a begrudging please to her commands. Yet the truce was short-lived. Bankhead was determined to get her revenge by never missing a single performance, ensuring that Scott, her understudy, would never have a chance to step into the spotlight. This story really reminds me of All About Eve. It's just so crazy. The drama behind the scenes was as compelling as the one unfolding on stage. During the tumultuous run of The Skin of Our Teeth, Lizabeth Scott stirred up even more drama by embarking on an affair with the very producer who had discovered her, Michael Meyerberg. Whether this romance was driven by genuine passion or strategic maneuvering against Tallulah Bankhead remains a mystery. But according to Tallulah Bankhead, yeah, she was strategic. She was like, hey, me as an understudy, I will be on top. So she went and got with the producer. Either way, the alliance intensified the pressure on Bankhead, eventually causing her to develop an ulcer and quit the show. Bankhead got so stressed from like the strategic little sneaky stuff that Lizabeth Scott was allegedly doing behind the scenes, which is getting with the producer, having an intimate relationship, and then, doing a lot of nice, nasty things. She really developed an ulcer and ended up quitting the show and was just like, you know what, whatever, y'all can have it. It seemed like Scott's moment to shine had finally arrived, but however, in a shocking twist, Meyerberg betrayed her by hiring Miriam Hopkins to replace Bankhead, relegating Scott to the understudy position once again. Her carefully laid plan backfired on her, but rumors had it that Meyerberg did that to control Scott, just like he did for Tallulah Bankhead. He always wanted Scott to be the lead, to be the star, but he wanted her to know that you are replaceable and I'm not just going to give it to you right away. It was a way to control the stars. Producers and directors would do stuff like that. They turn them against each other. Even labels, song labels, they still practice this today, where you'll see like it could only be one main singer in the industry, especially within ethnic groups and with women. It's more competitive for women. So this was a tactic that they did in the golden age of Hollywood, where they would pit the women against each other and make it a you versus her thing. And then it made the woman fight for the favor of the producer. And some women would go through great lengths to be the favorite because it meant more money, more screen time and stuff. So they'll even go as far as just giving their bodies to these sneaky producers. And they knew these women were vain, wanted the spotlight, wanted to be famous so bad that they would actually fall for the trick of the competition and then go through great lengths, whether it was not necessarily intimate, but overworking themselves to the point where they'd get sick, but they'd overwork themselves. And the more they worked themselves, the longer hours they stayed, the more they tried to perfect their craft to win favor from the producers and directors, the more money the producers and directors would be making. Very tricky. Months later, Meyerberg found himself in dire strait with a sick actor, right? And no understudy. So the woman he hired to replace Scott now all of a sudden became sick. And some people was like, okay. Desperate, he reached out to Scott, begging her to step into the role one more time. And despite any bitter feelings towards the man who had overlooked her for the lead role, Scott agreed to help out, showing her professionalism and class. Some whispered she might have been dabbling in some dark arts, given how both Bankhead and Hopkins conveniently fell sick. A lot of people was like, what kind of voodoo? You guys know I did a video for Bette Davis, who played in All About Eve, and in real life, her own daughter was saying that Bette Davis would do, magic behind the scenes, cast spells on her co-stars if she wanted a role so that she could get it. That was according to her daughter. So in Hollywood, they would do that. And it just seemed like this was just the case for Lizabeth Scott. Everyone would just fall sick or walk away, or she somehow climbed to the top whenever she was somewhere. It just didn't make sense. So people started to look at her like a bad omen. And she even developed the nickname, The Threat, because they felt like whenever she would be on a scene with you, she was a threat, not only to your life, but you guys will see. On August 30th, 1943, Scott finally took to the stage as Sabina, delivering a performance that captivated audiences and put an end to the Scott versus Bankhead saga, at least for now. Little did Scott know this performance would open doors to a new and thrilling chapter in her career. Following her successful stint in The Skin of Our Teeth, she caught the eye of Hollywood, but not initially for her acting prowess. A modeling spread in Harper's Bazaar showcased her striking looks, attracting the attention of a Hollywood agent who beckoned her to Los Angeles. Her initial foray into Hollywood wasn't smooth sailing. Universal and International Pictures showed little interest in the budding starlet. Then came Paramount, and a surprising reunion with producer Hal B. Wallace, the same man she had stood up at the last minute a year prior. It seemed like a cosmic setup for Strike 3, ready to boot her out of the industry for good. But luck was on Scott's side. Wallace bore no grudge and swiftly cast her in her first film, You Came Along. A romantic comedy, Scott dazzled on screen, earning the moniker Hubba Bubba Girl from an impressed critic. Her star was on the rise, and she quickly moved on to her next film, solidifying her place in Hollywood. But trouble was brewing for Lizabeth Scott as she prepared to face off against another acting prowess. The battleground, the 1946 film The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, co-starring Hollywood heavyweights Barbara Stanwyck and Van Heflin. At the time, Scott was still a relatively unknown, and Stanwyck, fresh off her star-making turn in noir classic, was not thrilled about sharing top billing with a newcomer. So Stanwyck felt like, hey, I am established. People are going to watch this movie because of me. I know it sounds very catty and like, what's the big deal? But it's like this girl hasn't proved herself yet. And there's an etiquette in any work field. It doesn't even have to be entertainment, even in positions in corporate, whatever. There's levels to this, right? There's levels to this. It's like a teenager comes in to work, they're 16 and they're working their day job at a store that you've been working in forever. You have the credentials, you have your degree and stuff like that. And then you watch that 16-year-old getting paid the same amount as you. And you've been at this job for like 12 years and they just came within 6 months. They're already making the same amount as you. Would that not piss you off? So that's what we're talking about in the industry. And back then, there was no overnight stars like that, and especially in the early golden age of Hollywood, because they really put in a lot of work. It wasn't easy, guys. They had to go to acting schools. You guys watch these videos a lot. A lot of them had to do surgeries, a lot of beauty treatments, and it was by force. They had to go to speech classes. They had to go to dance classes. They had to take etiquette classes. Day and night, their whole life was controlled. So they paid their dues to get the money that they were getting. And the women specifically was harder for them. And you know, the creeps they were dealing with behind the scene. And it just felt so disrespectful. So she was upset, rightfully so, with that, which you can understand before you see Barbara as the bad guy here, right? So Stanwyck took drastic measures, enlisting legal muscle to ensure that only established stars graced the marquee. So Stanwyck lawyered up. She was like, I'm lawyering up against the production, against directors. Like, this is not right. I should get paid more than this girl. It just does not make sense. This high-stakes standoff echoed Scott's earlier clash with Tallulah Bankhead, but this time she had a powerful ally in producer Hal B. Wallis. Wallis was relentless, mobilizing his own legal team to fight for Scott's place in the spotlight. Wallis' fascination with Scott bordered an obsession, okay? He wasn't defending her, so Wallis went and got her own lawyer and was like, I'm going to fight for you. Don't worry about Barbara Stanwyck. I'm going to fight for you, right? But it came with a cost because he was obsessed with her, prompting him to demand reshoots of The Strange Love of Martha Ivers focus on her close-ups. So can you imagine that Stanwyck was the lead of the movie? But because Lizabeth Scott started sleeping with Hal B. Wallis, allegedly, they started being together. All of a sudden, Lizabeth became the lead. And they demoted Barbara during this lawsuit. Oh, that is insane. And not only that, but they reshot a lot of the shots just so they can have close-ups of Lizabeth Scott. Comment below, how would you feel? When the director was mad about this, because the director was not happy with what Wallis, the producer, was doing, he was like, this is not fair. You know, he even understood the etiquettes. Let's not do that to Barbara. Wallis personally stepped behind the camera himself and was like, I'll do it myself, okay? Reducing Stanwyck's screen time in favor of Scott's. He started to reshoot everything himself. Stanwyck was infuriated. She unleashed her wrath on Wallis. Ultimately, Scott emerged victorious in this battle. She ended up being the winner, the lead, and all, securing ample screen time and top billing alongside Hollywood's elite. So then she started to develop this reputation like, okay, something's not right with this girl. It just, She had a lot of enemies now. Noir icon Humphrey Bogart in Dead Reckoning. And I did a video for Humphrey Bogart, which I love. He had a dark past, but I love that video. This time, there was no debate. Scott's name and image were prominently featured in all promotional materials, signaling meteoric rise to stardom, but with fame came a new moniker, The Threat. Audiences were captivated by the icy allure of film noir heroines, craving the psychological depth they brought to the screen. Scott delivered in spades, becoming the enigmatic muse that moviegoers adored. However, her success came at a price. Typecasting. She started to be typecasted. Scott's entrenchment in film noir roles deepened, both professionally and personally, leveraging her romantic influence over Wallis, the producer that had her back through it all. She famously stole the part in I Walk Alone from actress Kristen Miller, another enemy. She just stole her lead role. This movie epitomized her femme fatale persona. Co-star Kirk Douglas later revealed unsettling details about Scott and Wallis' relationship. suggesting it extended well beyond the professional. He noted that Scott often emerged from Wallace's office in tears from, their fight. They would fight a lot, hinting at a tumultuous dynamic that mirrored the dark narratives of her film. So she wasn't happy with it, but it was kind of like, I gotta do what I gotta do to be with him type of vibes. That's what he was alluding to. She wanted the fame, she wanted the parts, so she endured. While Scott basked in the glow of newfound fame, the enemies she made along the way lingered in the shadows, ready to strike at any moment. Her rise to the top of Hollywood's noir scene was paved with ambition, scandal, and a trail of broken relationships, both on and off the screen. Lizabeth Scott's love life was very tempestuous. She was romantically linked to Burt Lancaster, her co-star in Desert Fury and I Walk Alone, but something mysterious happened between them, turning their on-screen chemistry into real-life drama. During one scene, Lancaster's reluctance to kiss his stunning co-star was not that, he didn't even want to kiss her, okay? Lancaster was so repulsed by her, the person, not her beauty, but who she was. After seeing her true character, he didn't even want to kiss her on screen. He was repulsed, and he had to go through a lot just to kiss her. What came next was even more shocking. Lancaster wanted out of his Paramount contract altogether. He's like, I don't even want to be contracted with Paramount if it means I have to be next to this woman. And he was a big star, and she was now their big star. They would have to work together, and he was like, I'd rather not be contracted with Paramount. With Scott turning into the very femme fatale she portrayed on screen, Lancaster's ominous line in I Walk Alone, saying, what a fall guy I am, thinking just because you're good to look at, you'd be good all the way through, end quote. It began to feel like he was talking about her, like, hey, you're beautiful on the outside, but you're ugly on the inside. Clearly, Scott wasn't the wholesome beauty Lancaster had imagined. Scott's reputation for unsettling her co-stars only kept growing. In 1949, while filming Easy Living on a non-noir football drama with Victor Mature and Lucille Ball, Scott's presence caused another stir. And I did a video for Lucille Ball. I'll put all of those in the end cards and, the little cards in the video if you want to go check out those videos. But Ball was blindsided, right? The Lucille Ball, who was like a girl's girl. All the girls loved her. She loved all the girls, right? If you have drama with Lucille Ball, oh my goodness. So Ball was blindsided when the producer demoted her from leading lady to supporting actress. And if you know, Lucille Ball was a big deal, much like a Humphrey Bogart. She was the funny girl. People loved her, men and women alike. She wasn't like the sex pot, but she was just like a Betty White. Everybody loves her. Everybody loves her. So any film she's going to be in, she's going to be top billing. And guess what? They took her leading role and gave it to Scott. Oh my goodness. So then the nickname The Threat became solidified after this. This was Hollywood, her peers' final straw. Below. Would you want to work in an environment where all your peers disliked you? Imagine being in Hollywood and no one likes you. It has to be very lonely to know that it's not that they don't like you because jealousy and envy over, shallow stuff, but you're literally taking their bread and butter from them, demoting them, causing them to get ulcers, doing stinky stuff behind the scene. I don't know. Scott's final film with Lancaster, 1950's Dark City, further cemented her scandalous reputation. Lancaster initially signed on for the lead, but bolted once he learned Scott was his co-star. Charlton Heston stepped in instead, marking the beginning of a recurring theme. So when Lancaster found out, she'd be the leading lady, I was like, nah. So the whole Hollywood was talking about it. It was a huge scandal. Why did he walk away from that film? People wanted to know why. And I'll say he's a stand-up guy. He's a stand-up guy because he never said why. He never told people what exactly it was. He just kept to himself. It was just like he was terrified of even speaking on her and just avoided talking about her at all. In a bizarre twist of fate, 1953's Bad for Each Other saw history repeating itself. Lancaster and Patricia Neal were set to star, but when Neal departed, producers decided to cast Scott. And true to form, Lancaster fled the project for a third time, leaving Heston to fill the void. But even Heston wasn't immune to Scott's magnetism and, the complications that came with being around her. He wasn't a fan either, but he was just more willing to do what he has to do. By the mid-1950s, American audiences had grown weary of the dark allure of film noir, making it ripe for parody. Enter comedy duo Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin with their spoof Scared Stiff. Who better to add a sultry touch than the reigning queen of femme fatales, Lizabeth Scott? Still obsessed, producer Hal B. Wallace hovered anxiously over Scott, especially wary of her womanizing co-stars Dean Martin. So he was like, I don't want Dean Martin getting my girl. Scott was having the time of her life on set, mingling with the comedic legends Martin and Lewis. But Wallace was a nervous wreck, so much so that he ordered the director to keep the steam low in Scott's love scenes with Martin. And what's crazy is Wallace was married while this affair was happening, okay? Just to throw that out there. With noir films out of vogue, Scott found herself with more free time. She dove into reading and became captivated by Aldous Huxley's work. So inspired, she even contemplated joining a cult he recommended until she discovered it required a vow of poverty. That was a bit too much for her, you know. In 1954, Confidential magazine published a bombshell cover story alleging that Scott was actually a lesbian. They claimed she wore men's cologne, preferred men's pajamas, and loathed frilly dresses. Outraged, Scott lured up and slapped the magazine with a $2.5 million lawsuit. And unfortunately, a technicality led the judge to dismiss her suit. Regardless, all the public heard was that she lost. Her career was teetering on the edge, and her frosty relationship with the press didn't help. Scott never played the Hollywood game, shunning gospel columnists and leaving fans in the dark about her romantic life. Suspicions did linger because people were like, okay, if she's not a lesbian, then who is she dating? Because she was never out there with dating anyone. No one knew who she was dating. And a lot of people said that indeed she was able to keep such a chill demeanor with men, like how be like keep them obsessed with her because she didn't really care about them. And you know how men are. When you don't care about them, you don't want them, that just makes them want you more. So they was like, that's the secret. That's the secret. She really was living a double life. But she denied this a lot. She was like, this is not true. This is just because I'm not public with anyone. They want to start rumors. Scott's role in Loving New with Elvis Presley in 1957 seemed like the perfect comeback and a great way to squash the rumors of her being into women. Paramount producer Wallace, still obsessed, continued to champion her career. But strangely, after this movie with Elvis, Scott's passion for acting died. She no longer wanted to be an actress. She ended her film career, cut ties with Wallace finally, and perhaps inspired by Elvis, pursued a singing career. By 1957, Scott was ready to move on, busy releasing an album, and Wallace, however, wasn't. He sank into depression and eventually remarried, but his happy ending was anything but. Wallace spent his remaining years reportedly married to the wrong woman. Sadly enough, watching Scott's old movies nightly, a haunting testament to just how much of a hold she had on him, that he literally spent the rest of his days watching her movies, obsessed with her every night. Imagine how the new wife must have felt. After years of keeping her love life under wraps and facing scandalous rumors of being a lesbian, Lizabeth Scott was ready to go public with a relationship. In 1969, she got engaged to oil executive William Duggar, a dashing man in his 40s with a mansion on Mulholland Drive. Their 2-year engagement seemed destined for wedded bliss, but life was about to throw Scott a curveball straight out of a noir film. Just as the couple was preparing to tie the knot, tragedy struck. Duggar died suddenly under mysterious circumstances. The plot thickened when it emerged that Duggar had made a last-minute addition to his will, a suspicious handwritten note that was bequeathing half of his estate to Scott. It seemed like Scott was living out her true life of a femme fatale. So the mysterious circumstances, people don't know. I can't find pictures of her fiancé, but this note came out of nowhere conveniently when he died, saying all of his assets belonged to Scott. That came off very strange to people. Duggar's sisters wasn't buying it though. Thank God they were not here for it. She contested the dubious addition to the will, perhaps influenced by too many noir films herself, because they never got married. You know, if they were married, that would have been something different, but that was just her fiance, and he died under mysterious circumstances. And then this note that was handwritten, which no one revised, is allegedly from him. How convenient. In the end, Scott lost not only Duggar, but also the battle for his fortune, so she didn't get it. But that really upset her too. Marriage had given her a taste of its dramatic potential, but it just wasn't meant to be. Throughout her career, Scott remained fiercely private about her romantic escapades and despised any man who didn't share her discretion. I want you guys to comment below too. What do you think happened with that fiance? What do you think happened? She famously declared that if a beau ever went public about their relationship, she'd drop him immediately. She didn't want her love life out there. Her roster of gentlemen callers included notable names like James Mason, Peter Lawford, and Burt Bacharach. Adding to the intrigue was an unusual friendship with another enigmatic star, pop icon Michael Jackson. Despite their 36-year age difference, Scott and Jackson became close confidants, frequently appearing together at public events. Scott would outlive Jackson, but not by much, and it was known that they talked often. They were at parties. They had a really close relationship, but Michael had a thing for older women too, like Liz Taylor and all that. I remember Diana Ross. In her later years, Scott retreated into relative seclusion. She lived a quiet life until congestive heart failure claimed her, an ending befitting the haunting allure of her noir legacy. Scott left behind a trail of mystery and turmoil, particularly evidenced by her tumultuous interactions with co-star Burt Lancaster, who fled from her 3 times over. What exactly had she done to elicit such reactions? We still don't know. Lancaster remained tight-lipped for years, but he eventually offered a cryptic remark saying, "Becoming her close friend is a long stretch at hard labor," end quote. Yikes. He said to be friends with her is draining, basically. In other words, it's draining, it's hard work, it's not for the weak, and it's not something Run, flee if you must. What Lancaster meant by this is anyone's guess, adding another layer to the enigmatic life of Lizabeth Scott. This was a lot, and it's very interesting as you get into the stories surrounding her, because there's just so many stories surrounding her. But I must say, I do understand a lot of the actresses, like when you hear their sides, and even the actors, you hear their sides when I do breakdowns for them, you guys will see, it was like, oh, this was shady. That wasn't too nice, And I understand why they were weary of her, why they saw her as a threat. It's like any room she came, if she wanted something, she always had it. And she starred in over 22 films, and most of them was her taking the lead from someone else who already had the lead. Very cutthroat, right? Very cutthroat. Comment below your thoughts on this. I'm curious to see. I love you guys so much. Thank you for tuning in. If you like the music you're listening to, the link is in the description. I'll see you on the next one.